Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Can you tell me, before you learnt to drive, what did you have to do? Did you have to go to a driving school? Did you need to learn the rules of the road? What were the regulations that you needed to know for driving? In Australia, when learning to drive, you must gain at least 75 hours of supervised driving experience, including 15 hours at night, over 12 months. This is then recorded in a logbook. You then have to pass a practical driving test and an online test as well. When you want to study for a specific career, let's say a school teacher, what training do you have to do? In South Australia, training to become a school teacher takes 4 years of university, and it also includes several blocks of practical learning in a classroom situation. When you wanted to become a parent, what learning requirements were there for you to do? What were we required to learn or experience before our precious babies were born? Absolutely nothing. And here we are, talking about the best but often hardest job in the world, parenting. Did you ever have any lessons on parenting? When I was pregnant, which was 30 years ago, the only course that was available with pregnancy was a childbirth course. Now, I do remember some really odd sessions where they made you do physical body movements such as squats and crouching, trying to prepare you for the pain. Men as well, which my husband Paul refused to do, as he said he wasn't having the baby and he didn't really need to feel the pain. A lot of empathy there. However, for us it was a waste of time, and we didn't return. When I had my children, there was the Child Family Health Service nurse whom we visited once a fortnight for advice and to check up on our child. Now, these services have changed and grown, of course, over the last 30 years. However, the outcome remains the same. There are still very few avenues that parents can turn to in order to get a well-researched, well-written, face-to-face help and communication about parenting. Not just some influencer on Instagram who manages to make everything look easy. There are many great books and articles available, but in today's society, time-poor parents don't have the time or inclination to investigate these options to pick out the most important elements of successful parenting skills. Parenting is the most important job we have in our lives. So today, we're talking about parenting and upskilling our parenting. How wonderful would it be to understand our child's emotions, feeding and sleeping patterns from the very beginning? Yes, perhaps that's a little bit unrealistic. However, the most important point is that we can all learn and change our approaches along the way. It is vital to be taught how to teach our kids the valuable skills of understanding and communicating their feelings and thoughts. If we have our communication and emotional processes in place, it can make our journey so much smoother. Parenting is on a continuum of change, from babies to toddlers, school-age to tweens, teens and young adults, and in fact, change goes on with our relationships with our children every day until we die. How wonderful would it be to have access to well-researched ideas and information about how people handle every stage of life? I'm Kate Mason. Welcome to Parenting and Personalities. This is the podcast that connects you to the ones you care about the most. Today I'm talking to Professor Sophie Havigshurst. Sophie is a child clinical psychologist and the leader of Tuning Into Kids, Research and Dissemination. She's a co-author of the original Tuning Into Kids parenting program with Anne Harley. For over 20 years with a team of researchers, trainers and students, they've developed a suite of parenting programs, conducted and facilitated research, evaluating these programs and distributing them to the professionals to use when working with families. Sophie provides supervision to researchers and professionals who evaluate the program in different countries and different populations. She's also a director of the Parent and Family Research Alliance, a group of Australian researchers who work collectively to advocate for evidence-based parenting programs. Hi Sophie, thank you for joining us today.
Lovely to be here with you.
Now Sophie, can you just give us an idea of your background? Now it's a pretty complex question this, so what you do, where did you start, and who you now work with?
Sure. So I am a New Zealander. I was born to two parents who are peace activists and raised me to be politically active, I guess. And as I was training to be a clinical psychologist in New Zealand, I became really interested in preventing problems, getting in early, and came across some lovely work, this is in the 90s, by John Gottman and his colleagues from the University of Washington in Seattle, that outlined how it was really essential the way parents responded to emotions had a huge impact on what children learned in terms of paying attention to their internal world, paying attention to their emotions, and learning to understand and regulate it. And in the kids who end up with a lot of mental health problems or antisocial behaviours, one of the key things they're often not developing is this skill to be able to understand how to manage my anger, or when I'm sad, what I do with that. And a lot of that being because of the way that they are raised around dealing with emotions. And so I became really interested in this body of work by Gottman and colleagues, and I decided I want to do a Ph.D. looking at this. So I applied and moved to Australia, and when I arrived in Australia, through the Victorian Parenting Centre, it was called at the time, it's now called the Parenting Research Centre, I was introduced to Anne Harley, who was a parent educator. And Anne had spent many years working in the various different settings and sectors, looking at parent education, and had a very emotion-focused approach in her approach to working with parents and families. And she'd also read this work by Gottman, and the leader of the Parenting Centre, Lynn Littlefield, knew that we both had this common interest and said, you two need to come together and to begin looking at what you can do to put this into action, these theories into action. So that was back in 1999. And Anne and I have been working together for 24 years now, and she's retired now. She retired in 2020, but we have really just spent a huge amount of time going, how can we help parents and carers of children learn to interact, communicate, respond to children's emotions? That really helps children learn to pay attention to their internal experience. And that is a huge amount of work that requires them to do it, because normally for many of us that's a challenge, how we respond to another person's emotions, and especially when we have kids, how we respond to their emotions. So that's where we kind of began, and it's been a bit of a life work, as you can imagine.
I can imagine. So I'm going to talk about your tuning into kids in a minute. Do you think that, of a generation, so I'm 60, so my parents were of the war generation, etc. Do you think that they were ever of the people to express emotions and understand that stuff? And even I've come through as a parent, and I came through the soft phase, snowplow, all the rest of it, dealing with emotions, but possibly not putting in enough boundaries as such. So I'm wondering, has parenting changed emotionally in that issue? Well,
I think you're right. I think coming through generations of the world wars and all the things that have gone through that's the 20th century, our parents, people who raised us, it's like you get on with it. And so there has been quite a revolution and a shift in people going, okay, it's not just about getting through and coping. We actually have to look at how do people feel about these things? How do children feel about these things? So I think there's been a real revolution in probably, I remember starting with this in the 1990s, the theory behind it. And when Anne and I started this work in 1999, it was actually quite fringy to actually be focusing on parenting around emotions, and we were really interested also in bringing in some of the mindfulness ideas, which is also just sort of on its beginning at that time. And so in the 20 so years that we've been doing this, it has been a huge shift to being much more, okay, children's emotions are important. But then what often has happened is people often go, okay, so children's emotions are really important, but I don't put boundaries around the child's behaviour. And I think one of the things that in our Tuning Into Kids program that Anne and I and our colleagues with our team have been really interested in is you can still have good boundaries around a child, how they should behave and act, But you can do that with empathy. You can do that with, this is really hard when you have to say sorry and apologise to your friend when you've done something really awful. But you can still help a child to actually go through and behave and act in ways that are morally good, that take care of relationships. So it's not about taking out the boundaries, it's keeping them in there, but doing that in a way that you hear what that's like emotionally for a child. And when kids know that you actually can you hear what's going on for them, you connect with that, then they feel closer to you and they feel like you're with them in working through the hard things.
Well, it is very tricky, because I think, look, I regard myself as fairly well educated, but I've never even thought about that as a parent until I started looking into your work and the work of others that's happening right now, because it's kind of gotten a little bit out of control, like you say, and hopefully the pendulum's swinging back to the middle on behavioural issues with children. But I would seriously, if I was bringing my children were young again, I would actually go to classes, because I think this is a really tricky thing to sit there and, we were brought up with really not be seen, not heard, but we were brought up in, like you say, man up, you'll be fine, let's get moving, too bad. So it's, how do you spread that? Because it's really hard. There are so many people out there, and so many people aren't even looking at this area, or looking at learning about it. So how do you spread that?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I guess one of the first things there is that we parent often automatically when it comes to emotions. So when our children are very angry and doing something really awful, and we are really activated ourselves, we tend to revert back to the way we were raised. That comes out. It's like almost like it's sort of comes from within us somewhere. So changing generationally, like how do you change the way you actually respond and react to emotions, requires one significant amount of looking at, well, how was I raised, and what was the way sadness was taught? We didn't talk about sadness, or we just only react with shouting when we were sad. That was the way I grew up. So the reflecting on what has happened, and then how does that affect me now in my intimate relationships, in my parenting? When I can do that, that starts me on that journey. And then the second part, so that's the sort of insight part, but then you've also got to develop some skills. And because we automatically react with emotions, we actually have to have things that we can do in the moment when we are flooded by our own emotions, our own reactions. And we have to do things that often don't involve our thinking part of our brain. They involve us I need to get up and move around. I need to have a cold drink of water. I need to take 3 breaths. So that actually helps calm me down enough to then go, actually, I know right now what I do is I yell at my kid, and I actually need to hold back right now. So we've got to learn those skills of what to do in the moment. So what we've found is that the process of that sort of some development of some insight and the skills, the two together are very helpful. And I think most of us benefit from learning, and having a place to talk about, reflect, hear from other parents and develop those skills. So it's almost like, we give, if we're going to give you a car to drive, we ask you to go and do a whole lot of training around how to drive. We don't do that with parenting. It's sort of that, because we've had it done to us, we've been raised, we therefore know what to do. But if we want to learn and shift and do things differently from one generation to the next, I think it's really key to actually have that process of learning like we do in any other education space, and that should be very normalised and available freely to everybody. So that's a really important part of this learning.
I was running a workshop last week when a very frustrated member of the team asked why no one on their team cared about structure and timeframes. Does this happen at your workplace? Frustrations lead to unhappiness and disillusionment. Don't lose valuable team members. Contact me now at thepersonalitycoach.com.au to help you build team communication and cohesiveness. Because in a way, you probably do need to be almost like a driving license, told to go and do a parenting course, because I talk about that in the beginning of my spiel of this podcast, is no one ever taught us. We have to do all of these things to be qualified at many different things in life, but we don't have to be qualified to be a parent because we all just assume it's going to be natural and it's going to all come right and we'll be able to do it. So your kind of information is really important, but it's really hard to know how to get it out to people, whether people actually want it. Like not everybody wants to be told how to parent or what to do with their kids, and they're not all receptive to this kind of work, which I think is amazing work that you're doing. So you're tuning into kids. What kind of programs do you run?
There's a whole range of programs, I think, and your point is a really good one. Is that we need to be able to take the pieces of learning that we want, that fit for us, that don't get us feeling really defensive, that we can take on when we're ready. And so I think it requires a lot of options. So we have our Tuning Into Kids online program, just where you can watch and learn and do it in your own time, your own pace. It's completely not related to talking with someone else. That is often a really good thing to do. We have a lot of people run groups of Tuning Into Kids, where you come together with a group of parents and learn through having a curricula that you do, where each week you learn some new information, you build your skills and you build your process of talking and reflection. Some people do this in a one-to-one setting where they meet with somebody and they learn that way. And interestingly, we've in Victoria in Australia, we're just about to get to launch through the Victorian State Government the Tuning In Online programs, which is free parenting online programs, which are Tuning Into Kids, Tuning Into Toddlers, the Possums program, and Myrtle for Parents, which are all about tuning into children's emotions. They're going to be free online for all parents of 0 to 11-year-olds in the state. That's, I think, key, is how to get things out to people. Pick and choose when you're ready for this and how you want to take this in and learn. So we're getting that going. It's online, and then you can also get parent support through phone calls and group delivery as well. But I think we need to find ways of reaching people to reduce those barriers, like I haven't got time or I haven't got childcare to be able to help me go and do a parenting course. So I need to find ways of doing that that's really accessible.
That's a fantastic initiative. Hopefully all the other governments decide to take that on as well. That is the kind of thing we need. So with your programs, I've noticed that you've actually developed it with fathers as well, something special for fathers. You're kind of increasing your age group as you go up, which I think is fantastic, because I've got a 29-year-old and a 27-year-old, and I use all the stuff that you're talking about with them, because I think you can catch on to it at any time as long as you're eager to learn and listen and do things. I often say children are forgiving most of the time. Well, they don't necessarily forget, but often they will forgive because they love you. But I think that the initiative of going on, really, until we die, we're always going to be parents, and our kids are always going to change and be different. So starting and learning all of the stuff that you're talking about and using in different age levels, I think is really interesting and really different too, because you do have different events happening in, tweens and teens versus young adults. With that, do you run specialised father programs as such, or how does that work, or is that all part of the free programming as well?
The Dads program, and it's interesting, we're actually funded right now by Movember to disseminate the Dads program all around Australia. So lots of services are currently training to have and offer Dads groups, just groups for fathers, which is wonderful. They are often harder to get together and organise, so some organisations don't get that, don't have the resources, don't have the organisation to do that. But that's one project where we are getting out the program to dads, and we're training a number of workers, for example, from the Fathering Project, which is an online initiative for fathers in Australia. So many of their workers are going to run groups both online and in communities they're working as well. That accessibility, though, is a really key thing. How do you make groups available to dads? They need to be in the evening. They need to be shorter, briefer, convenient. They need to be online often to make them accessible. So I think that's something that we really have benefited from. This one of the positives out of the COVID experience is that we've been able to really make accessible our programs through online delivery, and it does reduce the barriers for fathers and for parents who might not be able to do that if you're a single parent, and when do you have time. So I think it's really helping in that way.
And massively, because I think we miss fathers out a lot in our education. I mean, I spend my time relaying stuff to my husband, all the time. But I think it is really, really important, especially, like you say, with more single dads around the place as well. So what are the pressures that take away parents' connections with kids these days? What do you see as being the greatest pressures of them not communicating well with their kids?
Sorry, what was my phone saying?
That's exactly right.
Yep. I think we get sucked up into the world, the online world, and it would be very helpful to not parent with a phone or a screen around very often. I think that's a huge one. That we can't always fix things when we want to. It's often when children are ready, especially as kids get older, they need more control over that process. You need time. You need time with your child. You need time when you're out walking, moving, driving, doing things together, sitting on the couch together. That's often when emotions come up. That's when kids want to communicate, when you're not going, okay, now's my moment to have a conversation about what's happening at school with you and why you're not doing your work. So that process of, I think that having that time and space is hard to do that. Also, I think if we have increased stress levels ourselves, we don't have the emotional availability, and that's a huge one as well. So what can we do to reduce our levels of stress and go, okay, well, what can I do that actually brings down my arousal levels and allows me to be more available for my kids, as well as be good for me and my relationships with people around me. So those things are probably all key.
Yeah, and it is very true. And so with that, what's your kind of best thing that you think parents could do now if they're not going to join a program like yours, or where can they find a program like yours? Just one thing that they could possibly do to connect with their kids more on an emotion-based level.
I think the next time your child is speaking about something with you, to try not to think about fixing it, to just try and hear the feelings behind what they're saying and just to communicate empathy. So that is really tough. That's really hard, or how stressful. So I think one of the key things, if you can, is to reduce that idea of you have to fix it, but instead to connect with empathy. So that would be one very small point.
Thank you. But I agree, a really, really important point. Thank you so much for your time, and I really think that your program is a wonderful thing, and I hope that people go online and have a look at them, at your program. And good luck with the free program with the Victorian government, and I hope that the rest of Australia sits up and takes a look and does the same thing.
I hope so too, Kate.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Don't let lack of awareness or knowledge be a roadblock to getting help with your parenting skills. Places such as Tune Into Kids offer online learning, or Zoom if you're unable to join a face-to-face group. If money is a concern, many sites have free materials and information available. Local governments and councils have many programs accessible. If you have no time, make some. If you and your children recognise that behaviours are a result of the emotions behind them, and you use these communication and emotional tools within your family, you'll have a great start to connecting successfully with the ones that you love. I'm Kate Mason. Thank you for listening to Parenting and Personalities. If you enjoyed this episode, do us a favour and tell one friend. If you're interested in discovering more about you and your family's personality types, you'll find my book, Who Is This Monster or Treasure in My House, on Booktopia or Amazon. If you have an episode idea, please send a note to thepersonalitycoach@gmail.com. Many thanks to our producers at Stories and Strategies, and we'll see you next time.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.